you said you guys have
I will give you a 30-second warning and then count you down 10 and then down for 5.
Welcome to the Entrepreneur Master Series. I am the real Jason Duncan. This is a live webinar that I do once a month with guest experts from all across the world who bring you very tactical and strategic information to help you in your business and in your life. And today we have a great guest on that's going to be talking about marriage. We're going to get really deep into the marriage thing. So if you're married, or you ever think you're going to get married, or you were married and want to know what happened, we're going to talk about marriage today, specifically in the context of entrepreneurs and businesses as we own businesses together, yet are trying to figure this out together. So we're going to get into that. But before we get into it, what is the Entrepreneur Master Series? Perhaps this is your first time logging in and seeing one of these. But this is, as I said, a live webinar series I do once a month, completely free to my community, to the TRJD community worldwide. I do this once a month just to give you good, strategic, tactical information about your business. I do these live. They are on Zoom. We also live stream them on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. So no matter where you are, if you're on any of those social media platforms, I just want to say thank you for logging in, being here today. By the way, as we get started, go to the chat right now. If you're on Zoom, go to the Q&A bubble. But if you're on LinkedIn, YouTube, or Facebook, go to the chat and just give us a thumbs up and put the city where you're from, just so that we could see where all the people are from that are logging in today. We have people from all across the United States that log in and do this. So please go ahead and put that in there now. Each of these episodes is conducted with one sole purpose, and that's to give you information to make your business and your life better. And these also are released later as a special episode on my podcast, which is an internationally syndicated podcast called The Root of All Success. And interestingly enough, we're in this really back to the future time warp. I had our guest today on my show earlier today, but that episode of my podcast won't come out until the end of August, and this is coming out today. But if you listen to that later, you'll hear us talk about this today. It's one of those back to the future moments that you just can't understand. Your head gets in a pretzel. But I want to tell you about who it is that's going to be on the show and introduce her just now. So let me talk about that. So today I've got a renowned marriage coach, Elisa DiLorenzo, on the show. We're going to be having a groundbreaking discussion on the challenges and the limitations of the 5 love languages. And if you've been around any amount of time as a married adult, you know that the 5 love language written by Dr. Gary Chapman about how to handle, what is our language of love. This has been around for a long time and it's worked for lots of people, but it has challenges. There are limitations and it's not working specifically for people like you and me who are business owners, who are entrepreneurs. So she's going to help us discover a revolutionary approach to achieve lasting success in our marriage, not just in marriage, but also in our business endeavors as well. She's going to delve in together with me today and you, asking questions about the unique challenges that we face as entrepreneurs. She's going to provide practical strategies for finding harmony between love and ambition. And we're going to explore this thing called the 6 Pillars of Intimacy, which is a framework they developed a long time ago. That's a best-selling book that they've got now, and they talk a lot about it. And she and her husband Tony, and we're going to talk about this today on the show, about how to strengthen your marriage and build a thriving partnership. So I'm really glad that you didn't miss out on this opportunity, that you're here right now. And if you're watching a replay later, sorry you missed it live, but you got to come to these live. It's free to come to. All you got to do is register at therealjasonduncan.com/EMS, which you can see on the screen. EMS stands for Entrepreneur Master Series. So let me introduce our guest expert today. It's Elisa DiLorenzo. She has a top-rated podcast called The One Extraordinary Marriage Show. It's actually the top marriage podcast on all of Apple Podcasts. She and her husband, Tony, who's awesome. He's also really good looking too, right, Elisa? It's also, we talked about this earlier. But they speak to a worldwide audience about sex, about love and commitment, and they challenge every single listener to make the most important thing in their life, their relationship. The relationship with that spouse, your husband or your wife, should be the most important. And their best-selling book, The 6 Pillars of Intimacy, has transformed countless marriages around the world. And the framework is very simple. It's practical. It's powerful. You're going to really like it today. We're going to go through all those 6 pillars of intimacy. So please help me welcome Elisa DiLorenzo to the Entrepreneur Masters series. Hello, Elisa.
Hello, Jason, and hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be here with you. Jason has spoken so highly of you that I know this next bit of time together is going to be incredible.
Well, we're glad that you're here. And I want to speak to everybody that's out on social media land. If you're on Facebook, if you're on LinkedIn, if you're on YouTube, or if you're in Zoom, I want you to go and ask questions today. So think about some questions about relationships, about marriage, about how it relates to business. If you're on Zoom, use the Q&A bubble. My wonderful apprentice, Justin Tatum, is monitoring all of the chat channels on all the platforms. So we hope not to miss your question. I know we missed a bunch at one a few months ago, but that's because we had so many, we couldn't get to them all. So maybe that's a good problem. I don't know, but Justin's managing that. And if you're interested in having your production managed and produced like this one, then you need to reach out to deskrig.com. Garen Parkins is my producer behind the scenes with Desk Rig. They do a fantastic job. They set all this up. They put it on all the socials. He manages all the screens and the screenshots that are going on. If you're watching this live, he does a great job. So go check out Desk Rig, and we thank you for Garen for being behind the scenes. You're a rock star. So thank you. So Elisa, let's first of all kind of talk about why you got into marriage coaching, why you started a podcast around marriage, why you wrote a book about marriage. Let's kind of start there. to build anticipation towards these why 5 love languages don't work, and then get into the 6 pillars of intimacy?
Yeah. In a nutshell, 15, 16 years ago, Tony and I had a really lousy marriage. And we were looking at our future. Our kids were, 3 and 6 at the time, and we were looking at our future going, here's how this is going to play out. We're either going to stay together for the sake of the kids until the baby turns 18, we're going to get a divorce now, or we're going to get radical and figure out how to do marriage well. And we clearly didn't pick the divorce option, that said, hey, we'll wait until the baby grows up. Well, this is kind of an interesting year to even be doing this interview, because that baby that was 3 is now about to be 16, or is about to be 18. And so we would be looking at the last year of our marriage, and that didn't happen either. So we got radical. And in getting radical, we realized that there was a big gap in resources out there. There were a lot of books that were written, and kind of the conventional wisdom was go on dates and talk to one another. But that wasn't addressing the fact that we were struggling romantically. We were struggling in the bedroom. We were struggling with our finances. There were a lot of other areas that didn't get addressed with the conventional wisdom of the time 15 years ago. And so we said, you know what? What happens if we start talking about it? That podcast is now 13 and a half years old.
Yeah. So podcasting 13, 14 years ago wasn't what it is today. I mean, everybody seems to have a podcast today. There are a lot of them that are really, really good, and there's some that are
Yeah.
just not so good. But yours has risen to the top of the top as being the
Mhm.
top rated marriage podcast. Why do you think people have taken to it so well?
I think there are a couple reasons that have made our particular show successful. One is people get to eavesdrop on a real conversation between a husband and wife. In 760 plus episodes, there's been one interview. It's buried in, I think, like 16 or 17. And what we found is we liked just having a conversation, the two of us, and our audience liked hearing what we were talking about. So I think that consistency over it just being conversations. And the second thing is we include our audience in every episode. Right after the intro of every one of our episodes, there's a hug, which is really a testimonial, and other couples get to hear breakthrough. And I think that there's such a powerful message of hope in that one segment of our show that people have latched onto it. They've actually told us it's their favorite part of the show. I'm like, what about the other 25 minutes? But all that to say, creating the one family and being transparent about our lives has led to the success of the podcast 100%.
Well, and you've been very consistent, because you said 700 and what was the number?
I think we're recording 763 as of this conversation right now. We'll record that tomorrow.
So you're only 590 episodes ahead of me. So I just recorded you and your husband Tony were just on my podcast today.
Yeah.
We recorded earlier, and that was, I think, episode 177, and that
Okay.
episode won't come out till the end of August. Anyway, so congrats on staying consistent, because
Thank you.
I don't know what the percentage is, but it's really low for people who get into like the 10th or 15th podcast and quit. It's something
Yeah.
crazy. So congrats on being consistent. I want to be like you when I grow up, because I want to keep doing this forever. I love doing the podcast stuff.
The podcasting is fun, 100%.
All right. So now, what is the 5 love languages? Because I'm sure there's at least 1 or 2 people out there that haven't heard of it. But
Okay.
those that have heard of it, maybe they need a little refresher.
Little
Let's
refresher.
go there, because we're telling people that it doesn't work. So we at least need to get in the concept of what is it, and then we'll build.
Well, the 5 love language is a book written by Dr. Gary Chapman, written about 30 years ago. It is an international bestseller, tens of millions of copies sold, and a revolutionary concept back then. It looked at marriage specifically, the first book did, and said, you know what, there are these 5 love languages, how we give and receive love. There is words of affirmation, acts of service, gifts, quality time, and physical touch. And, even when Tony and I found this book, it was probably 20 years ago now, maybe, 20-ish. We were shocked. We're like, oh, okay. So now, your physical touch and your words of affirmation, your acts of service. And so we started adopting these identities. And it's really funny, because if you talk to somebody about 5 love languages, you'll probably hear a statement, something to the effect of, I am, followed by whatever the love language is. I am physical touch. I am words of affirmation. And part of the challenge with the 5 love languages is that they've become an identity for people, and they don't necessarily take into account that healthy marriages have some combination of all of those, right? And so you can get into this place where you're just in a silo and you're like, well, if I'm only words of affirmation, who cares about doing the laundry or, snuggles? It's just tell me what works. And that really becomes such a struggle for so many couples because they start to weaponize those love languages.
Mm. Yeah, and that's I think that's human nature, unfortunately, but we
Mhm.
latch onto something and then we use that something's supposed to be good and we turn it for evil. We use the superpower of
Yeah.
evil because I actually, honestly, have never read the 5 love languages. I completely understand conceptually what it is, never read it.
Sure.
So I don't know what mine is, but I have
Mhm.
suspicions about what it might be. But I've never identified myself as, words of affirmation, for example.
Mhm.
I've never identified myself that way, so I don't know. But I have heard people do exactly what you just said,
Yeah.
and so entrepreneurs who are the audience that we're talking to today,
Mhm.
everybody out there is an entrepreneur, business owner, or aspiring one. They we're driven people. We latch onto stuff like a dog with a bone. We won't let go. So the reason 5 love, like what I'm hearing you say, you correct me if I'm wrong, is the reason it doesn't work is because it creates an identity that actually is leading us to an isolation point, not to a connection point. Is that fair?
Right. Yeah, you have this whole identity that people take on, and if this is my identity, then this is the only thing that I can be, and so it doesn't allow for growth, right? And change of seasons, change of life. The other part that is really challenging, and I see this in so many of my couples, is that love language, it almost gets weaponized, right? Let's say my love language is words of affirmation, and if Tony isn't, saying the things that I want to hear, I have, and I've done this because my when we did it, my love language was words of affirmation. I'm like, you're not loving me. You don't love me because you're not saying what I, and all of a sudden it's this huge battle over what love looks like in our marriage, instead of saying, hey, I'm not feeling loved right now, can we have a conversation about this? But because there's so much wrapped up in identity around the love language, then when we either aren't receiving it or our spouse isn't receiving it, now we've got this huge tug of war going on. And marriage was never supposed to be, never designed to be a continuous tug of war about how we love each other. It was supposed to be this amazing relationship that we create as a team. Two people, I mean, if you think about that first image of a couple getting married, the officiant says, turn around and face everyone, and you are arm in arm, a team walking
One.
into life. That's the way we're supposed to do it.
Yeah. Well, you call your podcast One Extraordinary Marriage, and that's really
Mhm.
what we're supposed to be, man
Yeah,
and woman becoming one. I mean, there's a unique bond there that can only be had that way. And I
correct.
think oneness, unity, that's really, really good. So if the 5 love languages is falling short of what
Yeah.
we are attempting to create in this unity in this relationship. What does work?
Well, Tony and I, we've been doing the podcast for 13 and a half years. I have been a marriage coach for 9.5, 10 years, worked with somewhere in the vicinity of about 500 couples. And I kept seeing these themes. I mean, even when we wrote our first book, which was like, I don't know, 11, 12 years ago, we talked about different forms of intimacy. And that is really, when a couple understands that intimacy isn't just sex, right? That there are many, many different ways that you can be intimate, then all of a sudden that opportunity for growth and for connection is multiplied. And that's really where taking this framework of what we call the 6 pillars of intimacy and overlaying it on a marriage becomes transformational for couples. Because what we've seen and experienced even in our own marriage is that when a couple has vocabulary, when they have words, just like in entrepreneurship, right? When you identify your product, and when you identify your processes, or when you know what the customer journey is going to be, when all of that is labeled and identified, now we can do something with it. Well, what's true in business is also true in marriage. When you can identify where you're strong or where you have weakness, now you can do something as an individual and as a couple to really elevate and accelerate the transformation that's happening in your relationship.
You know, you said intimacy isn't just sex. And I
Yes.
wrote that down. Intimacy isn't just sex. And I think everybody should write this down. This should be a
Uh-huh.
note point, in my opinion, as someone who's learning right alongside the audience today. Intimacy isn't just sex. here's the thing: there are certain intimate relationships we have in life that, but we've dirtied up the word intimacy to only mean what happens, between the sheets, and that's not what it is. Intimacy, you can have an intimate relationship with your parents, because that's a special you have an intimate relationship with your God. You have an intimate relationship with a sibling, intimate relationship with your a best friend. So it isn't just sex, but there is a special intimacy, don't you think, between husband and wife that needs to be honored in a certain way, right?
Absolutely. And sexual intimacy is one of the 6 pillars of intimacy. Interestingly enough, when we were sequencing them and looking at what this looks like, we put sexual intimacy as the 6th pillar, because when the other 5 are really strong, the sexual intimacy actually goes to new levels. But looking at those other 5, the first one is emotional intimacy, right? The closeness and connection that the two of you have in sharing your thoughts, your feelings, your desires, the verbal and nonverbal communication. That's followed by physical intimacy. And this is very specifically non-sexual touch. And we had to separate those because we would get emails daily from couples that are like, I just want more connection with my spouse. I want to be held. I want to be kissed. I want to hold hands again. And yet, again, if we go back to the 5 love languages, one of the love languages is physical touch. Well, that's very all-encompassing, because for some people that's holding hands, and for other people that's having sex. And so breaking those 2 out so that people could talk about their non-sexual touch and their sexual touch gave couples, and continues to give couples, the opportunity to really identify what it is that they need and want in the relationship. The 3rd pillar is financial intimacy. And this is one that a lot of people kind of cock their head. Maybe not so much for entrepreneurs, but they kind of cock their head and say, Lisa, did you just use those 2 words in the same sentence? And I did, because when you are married, your finances, whether or not the 2 of you have brought your accounts together or you have separate accounts, as entrepreneurs, finances are a big part of conversation and what you're doing and how you're running your business. Same thing is true in marriage. What are all the financial plans, strategies, and whatnot, everything from a monthly budget to a retirement plan and insurance that the 2 of you need to talk about? So those are the first 3.
All right. So everybody needs to be writing this stuff down. So let's go through this. So we got the first one is emotional, and we're going to dig deeper into each of these in a moment. But
absolutely.
Emotional, physical, and financial, those first 3: emotional, physical, financial. And if you're not where you're going to write this down, just note that you can go back and watch this again. The replay is going to be available on YouTube, on LinkedIn, on Facebook. And if you're in my newsletter list, you're going to get this. We send a replay out every Friday. So emotional, physical, financial. Those are the first 3. What's the next 3?
The next 3, number 4 is spiritual intimacy. And again, this is another one where people kind of scratch their heads, because, whether you were raised with faith or you came to faith, later in life, it's often talked about as being kind of a solitary and individual relationship. But when 2 people get married, there's so much, ideally, we're sharing all aspects of our lives, becoming one, hence the name, like you said earlier, One Extraordinary Marriage. And so how do you share your faith journey with your spouse? What are those faith practices that the 2 of you have together? Number 5 is recreational intimacy. And this is all the fun. This is dates. This is, going out on adventures. This is trying new things. So many couples fell in love doing things together, right? All of the adventures and whatnot, dating. That shouldn't end just because you've put the ring on the finger, you've started your business, you've got a couple kids, and life has, wandered off this way. And then finally, number 6 is sexual intimacy. And this isn't just sexual intercourse. It's foreplay, it's initiating, it's romance, it's looking at all of the ways that the 2 of you are sexually intimate and really expanding that definition. So it's not just a yes, we are, or no, we aren't, whether or not we've had sex, but how do we explore one another's bodies, which, like you said earlier, the one way that spouses, that's the one intimacy reserved only for spouses.
That's right. That's correct. So the next 3 are spiritual, recreational, and sexual. So again, write these down: spiritual, recreational, sexual. And I know that somebody in the audience is going to have questions about one of these. Maybe you've got a question specific about your marriage. You can even do it anonymous. If you don't want us to say your name, you can do it anonymous and we won't put it out there. If you're on Q&A on the Zoom, nobody's going to know you asked. If you do it on Facebook, or we're going to see, because there's no place to do private questions. But at least on the display, nobody's going to see your name. So emotional, physical, financial, spiritual, recreational, and sexual. So how did you determine that these were the 6 pillars of intimacy?
Lots of patterns. As a marriage coach, I'm having conversations on a daily basis, really digging into what are the things that people are talking about. Where was I seeing all of the roadblocks, the obstacles, the hiccups? What were couples tripping over time and time again? And then how do we label them? How did Tony and I, we sat down and we're like, okay, what are the patterns? What do we see? What can we call them? And a lot is made about emotional intimacy and sexual intimacy. Those are the 2 that are on the ends. Because it's often like, the chicken and the egg, which comes first, right? Do we have emotional intimacy before sexual intimacy? And so we wanted those to have kind of that place of prominence on either side. And then you have the 4 in the middle where people are talking, like I said earlier, the difference between physical intimacy and sexual intimacy. What does it look like to make your dating life, your adventures, your fun, to really understand that is a pillar that holds up your marriage? It's not just something like Tony said in the podcast interview earlier today. Like, when we were struggling in our marriage, he felt like all the advice from old men was go out and take your wife on a date. Well, if that's always dinner and a movie and you're doing the same thing and you're ordering the same food and you're sitting in a theater not talking to each other, is it really intimate, or is it just routine? And that's really where you start to look at with a lot of these intimacies as well.
You use the word routine, and I want to talk about this for a second. So
Sure.
entrepreneurs have been have it had crammed down their throats for the last, 10 years or so, this idea that you have to have routines. You've got to do certain routines. You got to have a morning routine, you got an evening routine, you got a
Yep.
physical routine, all right. So I get it, 100% understand it, but you just used the word routine in a negative connotation, is that intimacy and routine can sometimes be at opposite ends of the spectrum. Is that what you intended? Is that what you meant? Kind of dig into that, because that routine thing.
Oh, yeah.
So tell me about that.
I'm married to the guy, Jason, who wears a black t-shirt, same brand, black t-shirt every single day because he doesn't want to think about what shirt he's going to wear. And he wears the same brand of pants. He has them in 4 different colors. Like, everything coordinates. He doesn't have to think about it. Black t-shirt goes with everything. So I get the benefits of routine. We do have processes in our business. All of you entrepreneurs have processes too. When it comes to our relationships, specifically with the person that we are married to, routine can lead to boredom. It can lead to disengagement, disconnect, because we know what it's going to look like. So why be fully present? Where instead, if we say, you know what, we're going to continue to bring excitement into our relationship, we're going to do different things, we're going to try new things, anticipation actually shifts how our brain sees things. When we're looking forward to something, when we don't know what's going to happen on the other side of a date or an adventure, or even trying a new position in the bedroom, we're fully present. And being fully present is one of the biggest gifts that you can give to your spouse.
It made me think of this statistic, and I don't know the number, so I'm gonna have the number wrong, but like it's significantly high. Let's say 80%. 80% of car accidents happen within 20 miles of someone's home, or 10 miles or something. But the numbers are wrong, but the point.
Yeah.
And why? Why is it? Because it's what you just said, is that we become so familiar and routine, we stop paying attention. You can drive home. I could drive home from the grocery store blindfolded. My car knows how to get there, right? I don't need to pay attention. But if I switch it up and say, you know what, I'm going to go through this other neighborhood today, or I'm going to drive this direction, I have to pay attention. And that's the same thing in our marriage relationship. This is gold. I've never thought about this, but this makes so much sense, Elisa, is that if we get into these routines, and as a married couple, that's where boredom, you said routine can lead to boredom. I wrote that down. That's a good one. Routine can lead to boredom, and then it makes you stop paying attention. So anticipation can liven things up because you don't know what's going to happen next. So I love that.
Absolutely.
That's good.
Absolutely. And, it makes sense that there are areas of our life, especially as entrepreneurs, that we do systematize, that we do have great processes for. Why? Because it makes us more efficient. But, I know enough about you and your audience, Jason, that it's not just efficiency for efficiency's sake. It's efficiency for family and freedom's sake. And what do you get to do on the other side of that? Because your business is super efficient and systematized, so your relationship doesn't have to be, so that you can go have those incredible adventures with family, so that you can take your spouse on a trip or just a lunch, the two of you in the middle of the week randomly, right? Being in that place of saying, where does routine make sense and benefit me? And where do I need to have excitement, anticipation, and variety?
And it's not just in the bedroom, although we men would like that. I know that there's some other women that would probably say the same thing. So
I
let's
was gonna,
talk about these these 6 pillars of intimacy.
yeah.
Is there something specific that we can kind of go through to hang our hat on each, the emotional, physical, et cetera, on down through there? And then also audience, hey, if you have a question, if you want to ask a question, it could be anything related to marriage, and Alisa's here to answer your question. Please type that in. Let us help you and make this interactive. But before we get to what I just asked Alisa to do, I want to talk about our sponsor of the Entrepreneur Master Series. So the EMS is sponsored by Story. Now, Story is the company behind so many of the viral TikTok and Instagram reels and YouTube shorts that you see out there. What they do is they're a company that takes your raw content and turns it into viral short form videos. All you do is record it, send it to them. They handle the rest. They can do the editing. They can do the on-screen graphics. They can do the on-screen subtitles. They even write the description for the caption, do your hashtags, and they'll even post it for you. And it gets more. It's more than that. And they'll even interact and engage with your audience on your behalf on your channels. Now, you don't have to have them do all that. They can do any piece of that you want them to, but all you have to do is record the video. That's something they can't do for you. So if you're interested in trying them out, they'll edit one video for you for free. And if you want to try it out, go to therealjasonduncan.com/story. That's story with 2 Y's, STORYY. Why? Because they're awesome. They do all my stuff and I love them. They do a great job. Therealjasonduncan.com/story to get a free video edit and to get a discount on the service if you decide to move forward with them. Big thanks to Connor and Devin and the guys out at Story for being our primary sponsor for the Entrepreneur Master Series. Now back to the show. So Alisa, let's dig into the 6 pillars. So I'll follow your lead.
Okay. I always start with emotional intimacy. I say in the book that it is the workhorse of the intimacies. And that's really because how the two of you communicate dictates everything that the two of you do. And, I get it. I work with a lot of entrepreneurs. As a coach, I hear a lot of the challenges. And one of the biggest challenges that I hear when it comes to getting into that place of vulnerability or sharing feelings, a lot of times I hear, well, at least I'm just not a talker, or, I never really learned how to share my feelings. And a lot of people kind of sit in like a couple of feelings. Like I'm really angry, I'm really happy, I'm sad. And we kind of sit there. And, so it's okay. Like I tell everybody in regard to the intimacies, this is all skill development. And truth of the matter is that if you're an entrepreneur, you've already learned how to do things that you don't know how to do. This is just a different area of your life that you're thinking about. What do I not know how to do? So when it comes to emotional intimacy, I actually encourage, and I want to share this with you guys, I encourage all my clients to get an emotion wheel. This is on Amazon. We're recording this, on Amazon Prime Days. I have no idea if it's a Prime Day deal. That's, it might be. But being able to use a tool like this, where you can start with an emotion, like let's say you are feeling angry, and then you take it one step further and you're like, wait a minute, actually it's not anger. I feel frustrated. Well, why do I feel frustrated? Because I'm so irritated that, case in point, earlier today we were trying to record the podcast, we were having all these tech issues, right? And so that could lead to a irritation that when I can get really specific about it, and this is not just a marriage tip, but it also is great for business. When you can get specific about what you're feeling and why, it's a game changer for your spouse and it's a game changer for your teams, because then they can do something about it. You enter into this place of saying, this is what I'm feeling. This is why I'm feeling it. And you are empowered to make different choices, and they're empowered to engage in that relationship instead of just dealing with your really big emotion. Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me, because my wife and I have this conversation a lot. Are you mad? No, I'm just frustrated. like we clarify, I'm not angry. I am frustrated. And to me, there's a difference. Like when we were raising our kids, of course, they're older now, but when they would cry or say they were hurt, I'm like, are you really in pain, or was it uncomfortable? Because there's a difference
Mhm.
between pain and not being comfortable. So
Right.
I think for us as adults, as humans, is we're going to be married
Mhm.
and we're going to have strong marriages. I think that knowing the difference between being angry and being frustrated, or as you even took it another level, irritated, because I think
Mhm.
irritation is the lighter thing, and then it becomes
Yeah.
frustration, and then it could go into full blown anger. So I love
Mhm.
it. But I would say this for my audience: don't go to Amazon, go to eBay and buy it. I'm sure you can find it there because I hate Amazon. Don't buy anything from Amazon.
Fair
And
enough.
Elisa didn't know that. Elisa didn't know that. So
I didn't
no,
know that. So do what Jason does. It was just Prime
don't
Day.
go to Amazon. Anyway, sorry. So
No, totally okay.
the emotion wheel, how do you, is there a practical way that you recommend people to, because when you held that up, I saw it for just a minute, like it looks pretty intense. How do you use this?
So what I encourage people to do, lots of people collectively as a society, we don't often put labels to our emotions, right? It's so easy to just kind of sit in that, like either I'm angry or happy, like I was saying earlier. And so this is really about self-reflection. This is about, when I've experienced something during the day, as I first started to use this, it was like I would get to the end of the day and I'm like, okay, let me go back to that experience that I had with Tony and say what happened there. And so I would literally look at the emotion wheel and start trying to kind of pinpoint through what were the emotions. The nice thing about having a tool like this is that it's tangible. You can hold it in your hand. You're not looking at another screen because let's face it, we don't need to look at one more screen, but you can get to know yourself first because your spouse can't know you until you know yourself. Your spouse can't come alongside of you and develop that emotional intimacy if you can't verbalize what you're experiencing. So it's using a tool like this, starting in the middle with, whatever the big emotion is, and then saying, let me get more granular, not for the sake of getting lost in the weeds, but for the sake of saying, the better I know myself, the stronger my marriage is going to be because I'm going to be able to communicate to my spouse what it is that I'm feeling.
That's good. Yeah. So we've got Garen found the image and
Perfect.
put it on the screen. That's really, really good. So I can't read it on the screen that I'm looking at because we're on a multi-screen with the,
Yeah.
the production set up. But I hope that the folks that are watching this, wherever you're watching it, you can see some of that stuff. Maybe take a screenshot of it, take a look at it, and go back and replay this, so you can see what this emotion will looks like. All right. So, is there anything else on the emotional pillar, or do we want to move on to the physical?
Yeah, let me just, if it's been a while since you and your spouse have had conversations, what I want to encourage is don't try and sit down and have a 3-hour conversation and just hash everything out. I tell everyone, I'm like, start with the ice cream conversation. And that's really like, I mean, we're in Southern California, it's 82 degrees today. An ice cream cone is not going to last you that long. Make that amount of time. Start there. Put your toe in the water. Don't just try and jump into the deep end with these big conversations that maybe you've been avoiding for a while. Start small, build up the muscle, and over time, that conversation is going to get easier.
All right. Good. All right. So, what about pillar number 2?
Pillar number 2 is physical intimacy. And as I've said a couple of times here, we broke that out from sexual intimacy because that was a huge learning curve for us to see. Because Tony and I grew up, in kind of that whole 5 love languages thing, to understand that the needs around sex and sexual intimacy were so much different than physical touch, hugs, kisses, massages, cuddling, whatever that might be. And so, in learning how to separate the two of those, I tell people all the time, my coaching clients, I said, one of the most powerful questions you can ask when it comes to physical intimacy is, what touches are most meaningful to you? As you're asking your spouse. And the reason this is such a powerful question is that word meaningful gets us away from, hey, what do you like? Because even that is a routine question. What do you like? I don't like anything, or I like this. We don't pause and think about it. But when you hear a word like meaningful, the weight of it, what carries meaning in my world? What will touch not just my head so I know it's happening, but also my heart, that there's connection there. When you ask your spouse, hey, what touches would be meaningful to you? It also acknowledges the fact that what might have worked. I mean, Tony and I met, Jason, we met 29 years ago, right? So what touches were really good 29 years ago and where we are 29 years later, not all the same touches. And so being able to ask that question in different ages and stages allows the two of you to know what works now so that you can have that closeness and connection when it comes to how the two of you touch each other.
So women are just not looking for us to slap them on the butt all the time. Is that what you're saying?
No, and not every woman likes to be slapped on the butt. I know, it's like a crazy thought. I I am married to a man that definitely likes my butt, and it's one of those things. Like, it's always been the case, but you'd be surprised how many emails I get from women who don't like to have their butt slapped. There are
Well,
women out there.
I wonder how many guys are out there like, hey man, nobody's ever slapping mine. Why is my wife not slapping my butt? I need that. I
Yeah.
need- there's a funny YouTube short or TikTok or something out there around like the roles are reversed about how the wife gets treated by the husband every time she bends over or does something or drops something, and now it's reversed. The wife's doing it to the husband. I think it's kind of clever.
Oh, it's a good one. It's a
So
good one.
so physical is not sexual, although can be perceived as such, but it's really physically, literally physically, how you touch and engage with each other in the physical realm. That's what that pillar is about, right?
Yeah, and it's important to, especially if a couple has had a lot of disconnect in their marriage, if there's been a breach of trust, whatnot, that specifically around physical touch, the non-sexual touch, that there is even conversation around saying, "Hey, I'm not intending this to lead to sex. This is just I enjoy holding hands with you," because that actually starts to reestablish trust when the intentions are clear. Now, it's
Mhm.
okay to say, "Yeah, I'm snuggling up with you, and I would love to, make this move to the bedroom." It's okay to say that, but for intentions to be clear, especially when trust is being rebuilt, helps people to know what the motives are behind the physical touch instead of falling into a place like Tony and I did, where we were so dysfunctional at a place in time that I felt like every time he touched me, he only wanted sex. Dysfunction in marriage can lead to that.
Yeah. Well, so audience, if you got questions about how that might work out in real life, please drop those in the chat. Let's go on to number 3, the
Yes.
financial pillar. This is a big one. I have some strong opinions about this. I'm interested to hear what you're going to say before I share mine. So go for it.
Absolutely. Finances, kind of like number 4, which is spiritual intimacy. These are 2 pillars that often as children, we receive a lot of messages from our parents. We get messages like, we don't talk about money. Only one person handles the money. Like in my family growing up, I only saw my dad really handle money, and mom just kind of like, got to chime in from time to time, or, I don't remember my mom chiming in. It was just like my dad handled the money. So there are a lot of roles around money. There are a lot of messages around money, and you each grew up with that, and then you come together, and it's all supposed to magically work out. Magically work out is code for it probably leads to a lot of fights and tears, and it doesn't magically work out. So learning how to share what you learned about finances growing up, learning what your own, how to share what your own money experiences have been, being able to go, what is the vision that we have for our future, and how are we going to get there together, and creating a game plan, everything from what the monthly budget's going to be, to what insurances do we need to have, to putting an estate plan together and planning for retirement. These are joint activities. Because prior to having kids, I was in banking, and I saw way too many widows walk in the door who didn't have a clue because her husband had never said anything to her in the 30, 40 years they were married. And that's when I realized that having financial intimacy in a marriage, you don't have to all do one thing or the other. Everybody has their own strengths. But being able to talk about money and develop that skill is a gift. It's a gift to your marriage. It's a gift to your legacy and future generations.
What do you think about couples who keep separate finances, separate checking accounts, or whatever? What do you think about that?
I think if it's business related, and I mean, we have separate, as business owners and whatnot, there are separate accounts that are just dedicated to the business. And we've had different businesses over the years that one or the other of us hasn't been involved in. That I totally understand. I am a big fan, and it could be my age, it could be life experiences and whatnot. I'm a big fan of couples having full transparency and having all joint accounts, because it by default requires that you have to know what's going on in your marriage, that you both have access to it.
Well, you and I are of the same opinion, and that is my
Mhm.
strong opinion about this. I see so many couples who have separate checking accounts, and it absolutely boggles my mind. And if you're a listener who has a separate checking account, I'm talking to you. I don't understand it. Now, you could be right, and I could be wrong. It doesn't matter. But the thing is, I don't see how you can be one and have separate
Mhm.
finances. I don't see how you can be one and have separate sexual experiences. I don't see how you can be one and have separate spiritual experiences. I don't see how you can be one and have separate physical.
Mhm.
All these pillars work out. If you separate any of these, and I got my own spiritual thing, I have my own physical thing, I have my own
Yeah.
emotional thing. If you have your own financial thing. There was my wife, actually, we were sitting on the back porch last night enjoying a bottle of wine, and we were just enjoying the evening. It was nice. And she said, "Did you see that video about that guy that found out his wife had $100,000 in a separate account?" And I said, "No, I didn't see it." And so she goes, "You got to see it." And so I don't think she showed it to me, but we talked about it. And she said the guy not live, but like recorded his live reaction. "I just found out that my wife has $100,000 that's saved somewhere without me." And he confronted her and recorded it all. And her response was, "That's for me. That is for me, because if you divorce me, I got to have money." And I'm thinking, what kind of relationship does that? I don't understand. So anyway, that's my strong opinion. I think having the same financials is the same. Like that is the only way to do it as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. And, to be fair, we have had, like, Tony and I have our fund money every month, and that goes into a separate account and we get to play, but it all came out of sort of the joint pool, and then it gets divided there instead of having separate monies. I do understand when there have been multiple marriages and whatnot, why there might be a strong pull that direction. But, as in the case of this video, it concerns me when somebody's like, "I got to have 100,000 stashed away just in case, what's going on in that marriage. You guys need to get help." If that's, what you're feeling or what you're thinking.
Yep, I would agree. I would agree for sure. So does that segue us into the fifth or the fourth pillar of spiritual right now?
Yeah, because like you were just saying, there's not a lot of things that you can do by yourself when you're married. And Tony and I are big believers that faith is one of them. We know in our audience that there are a lot of different faiths represented. We know that there are a lot of marriages where maybe one person has a different faith background or journey than the other one. And yet what we've seen play out time and time again, and what we believe is, that is still something that is designed to be shared within the context of marriage. Whatever your faith journey is, whatever your spouse's faith journey is, and faith practices and whatnot, look for ways that the two of you can become one, that you can develop intimacy, being that closeness and connection, develop that closeness and connection, even if it's different for the two of you, even if you're at a different place in your faith walk, to be able to say, "You know what, we are one. How do we do this together? What can I do to learn more? What can I do to engage with you?" And say, "Because we are married, I want to participate in this with you."
Yeah. Well, I think that is a much more touchy subject, one that I have a little grace for, but I feel as strongly about, is that, two people coming together who are of different spiritual minds, you're just setting yourself up for a pillar that is going to be cracked. Even if all the other five are great, this pillar is going to be cracked, and that's going to be difficult. If one's a Jew and one's a Christian, for example, can that work? I've seen it work, but not often, because there's so much difference. One's a Muslim, one's a Taoist, like whatever. I mean, this spiritual, or one's an atheist and one's a believer.
Yeah.
These things have to be figured out. I used to, for those that don't know, I used to be a pastor. I was a pastor for 13 years before I went in and onto other things. But I did a lot of premarital counseling. And one of the things that I would always do in premarital counseling is I would tell the people I was counseling, "Hey, my job is to make you guys decide not to get married, because that's the right decision. And if I don't do that, then this is probably a good thing." And they would always laugh and giggle because that sounds dumb. But I thought, hey, if I can figure out where this is not going to work right now, I've saved you guys tons of heartache and lots of money. And one of the things I would do is I'd give them this book, and I probably have it somewhere. You may have used something similar, but it's a book of like 115 questions.
Yeah.
That are just random questions that you just go ask each other these questions before you get married. Make sure you understand. And what would happen if you won the lottery? How close do you want to live to mom and dad? How many kids do you want to have? What do you do at Thanksgiving? Where do you go? So
Yeah.
we got to ask these questions, and spiritual questions can't be ignored. We have to talk about it. So I love that that's one of your pillars for sure.
Yes. So pillar number 5 is recreational intimacy. And this is really one, Jason, where I see so many couples. A lot of the couples that I coach are in that like 15 to 25 years married. So kids are growing up, or you're very entrenched with all of the kids' school, careers, businesses are ramping up. And so there are all of these things that take time away from the husband and wife spending time together. And the challenge is that if you don't spend time with someone, if you don't create memories with them, you don't know who they are. And when those kids grow up, when careers hit a plateau, all of those things, you can find yourself looking across the table going, who are you? What do we do together? And it's why there's this term now this phenomenon that's happening in marriages in that like 20 to 30-year range. It's called gray divorce. People are waiting till the kids grow up, careers are doing well, we're established, all the things, and then they're like, I don't know you, because we stopped having fun together, because we stopped creating new memories. And so the recreational intimacy, it's more than just dating. It's going and spending time together and saying, hey, let's do something new. Let's do something fun. Let's do something you've always wanted to do. Let's do something we've never done before. Let's just go out for a walk. Building all of those things together to say time with you is just as important now as it was back, 2 years ago to 30 years ago when I was dating you. Because just like as an entrepreneur, you know that your business grows because of the time that you put into it. The same thing is true of your marriage. It will grow because of the time that you put into it.
This is something very interesting that you mentioned, because this is why the Don't Say Divorce clip that went viral for me, 32 million views. And the reason I even know you, because I reached out to you after the fact, is that one of the things that I said in that clip was that my wife and I put our kids second. And to the point, I put my wife first before the kids. That doesn't mean I devalue my children, and that was what people heard, but that's not what I meant. It's that she's first. So my attention and recreational, which you've termed recreational, which I like, is my recreational time is first and foremost going to be dedicated to her for throughout the entire marriage. There are seasons that I got to take the kids to soccer practice and tennis practice and whatever. You got to, and you're spending a lot of time. But what I see is so many people that dedicate those 18 years of the kids and completely ignore their spouse. And then, like you said, they go off to college and they look across the kitchen table at the person they don't even know, and they end up getting divorced. So this is why I love this pillar of intimacy, because you got to do stuff you like. Now, the other thing, and since you're a female and a marriage coach and you've been married a long time, I want to tell you something my wife said recently. And I thought she'd never said that out loud to me, but she was saying it to somebody else. And I thought, wow, that's why this works. So I love to ride a motorcycle. I love to go camping. I love smoking cigars. I love hanging out with guys at my cigar club. Those are things I like to do. And she has never, for the history of that I've known her, and we've been married 28 years, ever complained about me going to do any of that stuff. Now, I also don't do it every night, but she's never said, you're always so-and-so. And so I heard her say to some other people, maybe it was a younger couple, I can't remember what it was. And she said, when asked, what's the secret? She said, women, you've got to give your men space. They need the space to go do those things, to recreate. They need to go do it. And I'd never heard her say it. And she's never said it to me. And I thought, well, that's why this works, because I give her space. She gives me space, because there's so many couples that smother each other and want to spend all their time together, all their recreational time together. So I'd be interested to hear what you think about that.
I think it is very important for men to have friends, and I think it's important for women to have friends and to spend time with their friends. Because it actually, if you're spending time with people who are, encouraging of your marriage, same faith beliefs, same core values, that type of thing, then you will actually become a better human being when you spend time with your friends. And you bring that variety, you bring those conversations, you bring that experience, you bring just that breath of fresh air back into the marriage. Because I'm sure when you go for a motorcycle ride with your buddies, or you're sitting around, having a night where you guys are all smoking cigars, and it's just kind of this like, I just got to relax. You show up differently as a husband when you come back home, or the next day, or when you take her out, than if couples spent all their time together. This was, COVID demonstrated this for so many of us. When you spend all your time together and you don't get a break, you'll go a little stir crazy. And you don't get a break from the quirks. You don't get a break. We need breaks.
Yeah. There are times when my wife will look at me and she says, you need to go to the Standard. And that's the club. That's the club. I like it. She goes, you need a night. Go on down there, have fun. I'll see you tomorrow.
And that's okay. And what I love about even just the way you describe that is you're not offended when she recognizes that you need something.
Yeah. Well,
it's actually a sign of love.
Yeah, she's my best friend. Like we got to read each other. We got to know. We're going to read the room. We got to know what's going on. I mean, we can go through, and there's all the jokes about PMS and understand, but like as men and women, we have to read the room. We got to understand what's happening. If she's in an emotional place, hormonally or whatever, I got to understand that. I got to act different. Same thing. If I've been stressed out, a lot going on at business, she reads that. We have to read each other. It's not a one thing versus the other thing. It's where this is the other thing. Now, for everybody that's been waiting for pillar number 6, this is when we're going to get into the fun one, right? The sexual intimacy. So I don't even know how to start. I don't know how to start this question. So what is it?
So, sexual intimacy, again, we did put it as the 6th pillar. One, because when you're reading the book, you actually have to read, 9 chapters before you get to chapter 10, unless you just jump there, because there's a lot of buildup. But the idea behind sexual intimacy is that for so many couples, and I see this as a marriage coach, so many couples measure the success of their marriage as to whether or not they're having sex. The act of sexual intercourse is the measure of, are we good? Are we not good? And that type of thing. And what I found in coaching clients, couples, is that if we can expand that definition and they can come to an agreement on how they feel close and connected sexually, then that gives them the opportunity to minimize the amount of rejection that one spouse or the other feels and maximize their opportunities for connection. And here's what I mean by this. There are a lot of different acts that can be sexually intimate, whether we're talking about taking a shower together, whether we're talking about cuddling in bed naked, whether we're talking about oral sex or sexual, like all of these different things. And I had a couple I was coaching a few years ago, and they came to me and they're like, we have cracks in all our pillars, but especially in the sexual intimacy pillar. And we started talking, a couple married 10, 12 years, 3 young kids under the age of 8. And she was just saying no all the time because she was so tired. And so I finally said, hey, do you like having sex with your husband? She's like, well, yes. And I said, okay, that's a good place to start. I said, what if we expanded the definition? What if you would think, and I challenged her, I said, what I want you to do is I want you to think of other ways besides intercourse that the two of you can be sexually intimate. Because you're writing out, kind of creating your own menu, right? And so when she started brainstorming around this, she now was able, on a night that if her husband was trying to initiate or was flirting with her or doing whatever, she could be proactive and say, honey, here's where I'm at. Yes, this is a great night for us to have intercourse. Let's go do that. Or here's where I'm at. Maybe I've got my period, or maybe the kids have been hanging all over me all day today, or whatever it could be. I mean, she's a wife and a mother. It could be anything. I'm not up for that. Here's what I'd love to do instead. And I remember the first coaching session I had with them after they deployed this concept of expanding their definition of sexual intimacy. And I looked at him and I'm like, so how many times have you heard the word no in the last couple of weeks? He's like, I haven't. And I looked at her, my eyes big as saucers, and I said, what's going on? She goes, well, I have a lot more choices. And she was able to smile and feel confident. And I realized at that point in time that if we can, through the 6 pillars, through talking about sexual intimacy as being more than just intercourse, if we can equip couples with a wider menu, buffet, whatever it might be, then they can be in this place where the two of them can say yes a whole lot more than they're saying no. And when yes is heard in the bedroom more because they're on the same page and they've got this opportunity to really connect this way, it shifts everything about the marriage.
It does. I remember, gosh, it was probably about 15, 20 years ago.
Okay.
So we hadn't been married. Well, I guess we've been married 28 years. So I think it was about 20 years ago. We went to a marriage conference, marriage retreat, probably very much like what you guys do today. With you guys host marriage retreats, which you should definitely tell everybody about before we finish the call today. But we went, and it was the first time we had, either of us in our young married life, and we were young. We got married at 20 and 19. Okay. So first time we ever heard about how the sexual need cycles are different in men and women. So men, and you probably know this better than I do, but men about every 48 hours have a peak in the sexual need. Now, I know we could joke about it's every day, every minute. I get it. But like in reality, what I remember him saying was about every 48 hours. So every other day, where women, I don't remember, I'm not a woman, so I don't remember what it was, but it was longer than that. It was maybe once a week or every 4 or 5 days or something like that. And so what the guy said was, and it was a speaker, it was a marriage person, and he's a marriage coach like you, and he said something like, ladies, listen, I get it. There are times you don't want it, and that's natural because your need does your gap between needs is bigger than his gap between needs. If you can just help meet him in the middle on those needs, you'll have an amazing transformation in your sexual intimacy. Changed everything. The fights that I look back to early days of our marriage, we fought more about money and sex than anything else. Those were the two things we fought about because I wanted it and she didn't on sex. And then on finance, it was just we didn't agree on how to spend the money. We didn't have any. So we were always worried about it. But once we came to that understanding of the schedule and what the schedule means, oh, okay. Now we haven't had fought about that 20 years. I mean, it's that big of a shift in our. So if I look at these 6 pillars, that one got fixed just by understanding the schedule. Understanding the schedule. For me, that was a big thing.
Well, and I love that language around, meet in the middle or meet him in the middle, because what's so important about that is it's not saying, hey, ladies, or the lower desire, or the one that wants it less frequently, however that's described there. It's not saying just say yes. It's saying let's create a plan for your marriage. It's kind of like, I love that I'm speaking to entrepreneurs, because as entrepreneurs, you understand that there are multiple solutions to get to the outcome. And so it's looking at this and saying, okay, well, if the outcome is, sexual connection and sexual intimacy, there isn't just one way to do it. Let's have this conversation and say, what are all of our options? Right? We, kind of going back to what we were saying about routine earlier, we don't have to do the same thing every time. What's the solution for today? What's the solution for this set of circumstances? How do we connect, given everything that's going on in our lives and business and whatnot, to be in this place that says, this is our opportunity today?
So tying all this together, we've got emotional, physical, financial, spiritual, recreational, sexual. All of these are vitally important to a healthy, united marriage. I would say this from my faith perspective. I believe that God created humans as male and female, and the intention is for the sexual relationship to be between a man and a woman who get married. And that's who my wife and I were virgins. We got married, and I'm very proud of that. We've experienced amazing sexual relationship, I think, in large part due to the fact that we're the only 2 people that we've ever shared that. And I realize that that's not the same for everybody, but I think that sexual intimacy is reserved for that marriage relationship between a man and a woman in the marriage relationship. But now you've given me these 6 pillars, and I think about, wow, these other pillars have a whole nother layer of depth that is only shared between a man and a woman in the same relationship. So I think it's more than just sex that's reserved for that relationship. I think there's an emotional connection, a physical connection, financial, spiritual, recreational connection as well. And so to that end, Elisa, I think this has been groundbreaking for me, just to understand it's not just sexual relationship that's been reserved for that, but it's all these other pillars. So that's my perspective, and I thank you for that.
You're welcome. And that's why Tony and I wrote the book. We use the concept of pillars because in architecture, pillars do a couple of things really well. They add beauty. So when these pillars are strong in your marriage can't help but be more beautiful and more attractive to others, and really be kind of that light on a hill for people in your community that want to do marriage well. Pillars add strength. When these pillars are strong, your marriage has a strength to weather the storms that are going to come, because this side of heaven, we aren't guaranteed rainbows and unicorns all the time. And the pillars also carry weight. So when those storms do come, the strength, the skills that you develop in any one pillar that can be applicable to the other pillars give you the strength to go through as a team, and to really focus on what the challenge is, and not to turn on one another and saying, well, you're not doing this, or you're not doing. It's like, no, we're on the same team. How do we do this together?
Yeah. And I said in my TED talk, which will hopefully be released here soon. Yeah. One of the things I said is that marriage is not 50-50. I think the best piece of marriage advice I ever got is marriage is not 50-50, because if you go into it 50-50 and you're looking for 100%, and it's not 100%, you will always assume the other person didn't do their 50. So if you go into it with 100 mentality, like this is 100, we're getting 100%. And so if it's 85%, I need to add 15%. I don't go looking to somebody else to add it. And that mentality echoes exactly what you said, is that this is a team. We're a team. We're on the same team. We're not enemies. We're friends. We're on the same team, and we're connected in a oneness that can't be shared by any other human being on the planet. And so this is really, really, really good, Elisa. I know you probably have a ton of fun doing what you do as a marriage coach and seeing the blessings of restored marriages, strengthened marriages, and the legacies going into the children and the grandchildren. So could you take some time now as we get ready to kind of close this thing out, talk about how you engage with your clients, what opportunities there are for people to get involved, because I think people are going to want to reach out.
Absolutely. Tony and I saw very early on, we would start to get emails of people saying, you know what, how do we do what you did? How did we transform our marriage? And that's like, I never set out, Jason, to be a marriage coach. It was kind of like, hey, Tony and I did it. We fixed our marriage. Yay. And then we couldn't ignore the emails that were coming in. And so for me, it was a natural progression to get my coaching certification, to start studying marriage and to say, you know what, I'm going to get in the trenches with couples. I often see couples, after trust has been broken, when things aren't going well, when a marriage is sexless, when communication is gone, when they just don't have gotten into these routines, word we used earlier, of fighting or not speaking to one another or whatever. And I am privileged to equip and walk alongside these couples to see their breakthrough. My best days are when a couple looks at me and they talk about a fight that they had and how they worked through it, or a couple that was considering divorce says, you know what, we've had a change of heart. And I don't take it lightly that a couple invites me into their marriage. It's a privilege and an honor. And like I tell my clients all the time, I still see God working miracles. It still happens. Today, it is one of those things that I believe God exists because of the miracles I get to witness. And so that's a really special thing. And, as far as engaging with me, we make it super easy at the One Extraordinary Marriage on our site. But I believe we actually provided a special link, Jason.
Yes, we've got that. Let's see, where is it in my notes?
I was gonna say, I thought we had done something extra special just for you guys.
Well, it's not on my notes, but I remember talking about it. I just didn't make it to my notes that I've got on the screen.
Okay.
Garen, is that image, you can put it in the chat. Is that image from the link that we had shared internally, or is that an image that Elisa gave?
That looks like our site.
Okay, gotcha.
That's for the marriage coaching. I was going to say, while we're chit-chatting, let me see if I can just get the link up here.
Yeah, well, as she's looking for that, I want to let everybody know that regardless of whether we're able to push it out there audibly on this show right now, we will make sure that it's in the show notes. And of course, you can reach out to them directly at their website, which is oneextraordinarymarriage.com, extraordinarymarriage.com. And you can also reach out to me through my site at therealjasonduncan.com, and I can put you in touch. What's interesting is we've also partnered with them on my don'tsaydivorce.com site. So if you go to don'tsaydivorce.com, you can see that. But yeah, here we go. Garen, the Calendly link Elisa just dropped in the chat. I don't know if you can copy that and put it on the screen. It'll be hard for people to kind of pull off the screen, but we'll try to get that in the show notes. Justin, Perfect. If you can also grab that from the back and drop it in the chats on Zoom, LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube, then everybody who's watching on any of those platforms can just click on it. Yeah, it'll be hard to copy down. Take a screenshot. Take your phone out, do a screenshot of what you see right now, and you can book a free call with Elisa directly. So I'll let you tell them about that.
Yeah, we wanted to, just because we believe so much, your Don't Say Divorce, that's a message that we've been talking about for a long time at One Extraordinary Marriage. I mean, Tony and I took divorce off. We actually have a podcast episode called Divorce is Off the Table. That was decision we made, and we're in the business of giving couples the tools and strategies they need so that word is not part of their vocabulary, so that they have the tools and strategies they need to make their marriage extraordinary. And so knowing that I was going to be here, I did make a consultation available to all of you, consultation times available to all of you. So if you want to click on that link, I know Jason said and the team are going to make it available, but let's chat. Right? If you're in a spot where you're like, hey, something's going on with my marriage, what would it look like to work with you? I'm happy to have a conversation and to talk through and learn a little bit more about what's going on and share with you, more than what we just talked about here, share with you how I work with couples and individuals to help them get the breakthrough in their marriage.
All right. Well, Elisa, it's been a pleasure going a deep dive in this these 6 pillars of intimacy with you. I want to encourage everybody to go pick up the book. You can go to 6pillarsofintimacy.com and check that out. And that's the number 6pillarsofintimacy.com and check it out. And One Extraordinary Marriage, spell out ONE, oneextraordinarymarriage.com. Check them out. It's these are good. So I'm going to review emotional, physical, financial, spiritual, recreational, and sexual. Those are the 6 pillars. Check your marriage against these things. Where are you at? I could tell you, like I just said a moment ago, I can look back in the early years of our marriage. Pillar 3 and pillar 6, finances and sex. Those are the things that we probably argued about more than anything else. And it's just because we weren't on the same page. We didn't know what we didn't know, and now we do. And I feel like our 6 pillars are really tight and really good. And I couldn't imagine a better life right now with my wife. And I'm so blessed. And I thank God for that. I'm so happy. So I'm glad you're doing the same thing to help other people find that.
Thank you, Jason. It's a privilege.
All right. Well, everybody stay tuned. Don't go away. I've got a few announcements I want to make and an offer to give you that you're not going to want to miss about our next Entrepreneur Masters series. So if you like this type of content, you like this type of information and value that it provides as an entrepreneur, there's more where this came from. You can join the TRJD coaching family to get access to this type of high quality coaching on a regular basis. And especially if you're feeling overwhelmed, exhausted, unfulfilled in your business, I have a free business burnout test that you can go take at businessburnouttest.com. And that'll tell you exactly where you stand on the burnout scale, what you need to do to recover from it and prevent it. So go to businessburnouttest.com and take the test today. Now, let me tell you about the next one of these that we're going to be doing. Now, this is going to be great. We're actually doing the next one as a live in-person event here in Nashville, Tennessee, actually in Hendersonville, just north of downtown. And it's called Why Dave Ramsey is Wrong About Whole Life Insurance. My guest expert is Mark Willis, the CEO and founder of Lake Growth Financial Services in Chicago, Illinois. We're going to do this live in-person masterclass. It's also going to be live streamed on all the same platforms that you're watching this on right now, but we're going to do a live in-person event. The in-person portion is only $47 to attend live. You can get your tickets by going to therealjasonduncan.com/EMS live. Now, it's a lot of links we've thrown at you, but that's what there's a pause button and a rewind for. You just go back and look at it again. Therealjasonduncan.com/EMS live. We're going to take Mark Willis. He's CFP. He's going to provide valuable insights into how specially designed life insurance can help build real wealth outside of Wall Street. It can develop streams of tax-free passive income in retirement and protect your hard-earned money as it grows in a unique way that only the wealthy have known about up till now. This live event is going to explore these little-known strategies to unknown to typical financial planners and stock jockeys, including how you can become your own source of financing and fire your banker. And for those who had a terrible experience with the banker, you know you want to do that. You're going to see how this might fit into an overall financial plan, whether that's paying off debts, investing in real estate, buying or selling a business, or preparing for retirement. So don't miss out on this opportunity to learn how to take back control of your financial future and build wealth that will really last for generations. This is something that I was only became privy to just a few years ago. Had I known about this in my 20s, my life would be completely different financially right now, but I was listening to the wrong advice. So I want to show you why Dave Ramsey is wrong about whole life insurance. And I want you to join me and Mark Willis live in person, Hendersonville, Tennessee on August the 9th. That's August the 9th. It's a Wednesday, 2 weeks from today. Actually, we're going to be doing that at 9 a.m. My notes were wrong. 9 a.m. Central Time here in Hendersonville live. All the links are going to be provided in the show notes, or you go to therealjasonduncan.com/EMS live. That's it. This is the Entrepreneur Master Series. I am the real Jason Duncan. That was Elisa DiLorenzo. And as always, Jesus is King. See you next time.
Good. Sorry, I was like fumbling around with all the controls trying to get back over here.